After years of silence, secrets, and betrayal, the true heir has finally returned. Duke 1 had not returned to his old home in 11 years. 11 years of believing his wife and son were dead. 11 years of grief so heavy that it had changed him on impulse. That's impossible. The house had been locked for 11 years. The caretaker only visited once a month. Yet tonight,
that sound had haunted his dreams for 11 years. The laughter of the little boy he believed he had buried.
There was an accident, Duke 1.
and most painfully, he believed. But what if everything he believed was a lie?
Mum, who is he?
Boy 1, go upstairs.
But who?
Boy 1, now.
There she was, his wife, the woman he had buried 11 years ago.
Mum, who is he?
Go upstairs.
But who?
Boy 1, now.
You're alive?
Yes.
You've been alive for 11 years?
Yes,
I buried you.
I know.
I buried our son. I stood in the snow and watched 2 coffins disappear into the ground. For 11 years, I believed you were dead.
I'm sorry.
Then explain it to me.
Lady 1 came to me 3 days before the accident.
My mother?
Yes.
What did she want?
She knew about the affair. Then she threatened me.
Threatened you with what?
Boy 1. She said she would use her lawyers to take him from me.
She made you disappear.
She arranged the accident.
How?
The coffins were not ours. She told me that if I ever returned, she would destroy me.
And you believed her? Boy 1 doesn't know who I am.
No,
What have you told him?
that his father was a good man who died young. I told him that you would have loved him.
I do love him. While Duke 1 mourned his family, Duchess 1 raised Boy 1 alone. And both believed they had lost something they could never recover. Boy 1 doesn't...
Mum made soup. There's some left if you're hungry.
I'd like that very much.
And just like that, sat down to dinner with them. Boy 1 doesn't...
Mum made soup. I'm working on a science project.
What kind?
Something about astronomy.
Boy 1 used to love astronomy.
Really?
Really.
You look familiar. I just can't figure out why.
What happens tomorrow?
Tomorrow I spend time with my son.
Not the whole truth yet. Just time.
And after that, when he's ready,
We tell him everything. And just like that, the man who had lost his family 11 years earlier sat down to dinner with them.
I know. You don't have to.
I know, but we need to do this slowly.
For Boy 1,
As I believed you were dead,
I'm sorry.
then it for me.
So you're really my father?
Yes.
And you genuinely didn't know we were alive?
I genuinely didn't know.
That must have been awful.
It was the worst thing I've ever lived through. Yes?
I'm glad you're not dead. For 11 years.
For 11 years, Duke 1 had dreamed of hearing his son's voice. He never imagined that one word could hurt so beautifully. They could not erase 11 years. They could not pretend nothing had happened. But they could choose what happened next. Some things between us are broken,
I know.
but other things, maybe they were never truly gone.
Maybe they were waiting.
They built something new from the pieces that remained.
Don't mess it up this time.
I won't.
Good. I'll be watching.
11 years earlier, Duke 1 had buried the family he thought he had lost forever.
Some families are separated by lies, but love can still find its way home. Never take the people you love for granted.
For 11 years, Ashworth Hall had been a tomb filled with memories. Now, for the first time, it was a home
Duke
again.
came home. The Duke returned unannounced to his old house, only to find his long-dead Duchess and son alive. I hadn't been back to Ashworth Hall in 11 years. 11 years of believing they were dead. 11 years of grief so heavy it had bent me into someone I barely recognized anymore. 11 years of running from the memories of a life I'd lost in a single telephone call on a cold January morning. My name is Edward Ashworth. Duke
The
of
laughter
Pembroke,
of the little boy
44
he
years
believed he
old.
had buried.
That
Until
night,
3 hours ago, I believed with absolute certainty that my wife Eleanor and my son James had died in a car accident on the A303 outside Salisbury on the 14th of January, 11 years ago. I believed it because I was told so by the police, by the hospital, by my own mother standing in the doorway of my London study, her face the color of ash. There was an accident, Edward. Eleanor and James. They didn't survive. I believed it because I attended 2 funerals, stood beside 2 coffins, watched 2 caskets lowered into the frozen January ground while snow fell on the shoulders of everyone who came to mourn with me. I believed it because what kind of man doesn't believe his own eyes, the kind whose eyes were lied to, apparently? I'd driven to Ashworth Hall on impulse. No plan. No reason beyond a vague pull toward the place where my life had once been whole. I'd been driving the back roads of Wiltshire for hours, the way I sometimes did when London became too loud and my grief became too heavy, and I needed the countryside to remind me that the world was still turning even when it felt like it shouldn't be. The hall had been locked up for 11 years. A caretaker came once a month to check the pipes and keep the grounds from becoming completely wild. I paid the bills. I never visited. Too many memories lived there. I wasn't strong enough to face them. But tonight something pulled me, some instinct I couldn't name. So I turned off the main road onto the long gravel drive and I drove through the November dark toward the house where I had once been happy. The lights were on. I stopped the car at the end of the drive and sat there, staring. Every window of the ground floor glowed amber in the darkness. The caretaker never turned on lights. Never had reason to. Someone was in my house. I got out of the car slowly. The gravel was loud under my feet in the still night air. I walked toward the house, not sure what I expected to find. Squatters, perhaps, or a break-in. I should have called someone, the caretaker, the police. Instead, I walked to the front door and tried my key. It still worked. The door swung open and I stepped into the entrance hall. Warm air, the smell of wood smoke and something cooking, the distant sound of a television, and then something that stopped my heart entirely, a child's laughter. High and clear and pure, bouncing off the stone walls of the entrance hall like music. I stood completely still, convinced I was losing my mind. I'd heard that sound in my dreams for 11 years, the laugh of a 3-year-old boy who had grown into a ghost that haunted every quiet moment of my life. I followed it, down the entrance hall, past the portraits of Ashworth ancestors lining the walls, toward the warm light spilling from the drawing room. I stopped in the doorway. A boy was lying on his stomach on the hearthrug watching television. 11 or 12 years old, dark-haired, with his feet kicked up behind him. A mug of something steaming sat beside him, and in the armchair nearest the fire, curled up with a book she wasn't reading, was Eleanor, my wife, my dead wife, 11 years older than the last time I'd seen her, gray threading through her dark hair, fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but unmistakably, impossibly, undeniably Eleanor. I must have made a sound, because the boy looked up first. He had my eyes. Eleanor looked up a half-second later, and in the moment before she could compose herself, I saw everything I needed to see on her face, not shock. Not the shock of seeing a ghost, of seeing someone she hadn't expected, recognition. And terror. She knew I was there. She had always known somewhere in herself that this moment would come. "Edward," she said. The boy scrambled to his feet. "Mum." "Who is he?" She stood slowly from the chair, never taking her eyes off me. "James, go upstairs, please." "Who?" "James." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Upstairs, now. I'll explain everything." Boy looked at me one more time with those eyes that were mine and left the room. I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Eleanor and I stood facing each other across the drawing room of the house where we'd been married, where we'd brought our son home from the hospital, where I'd sat alone for 3 days after the funerals because I couldn't face going back to London. "Alive," I said. "Yes, you've been alive for 11 years. I buried you." Something flickered across her face. "I know, I'm sorry." "You're sorry." The words came out flat, emptied of everything. "I buried you, Eleanor. I buried our son. I stood in the snow and I watched 2 coffins go into the ground and I believed you were dead. For 11 years, I believed you were dead." "I know." "Then explain to me, please, because I'm standing in what I thought was an empty house looking at a woman I watched be buried, and I need someone to explain to me what is happening." She didn't look away. Sit down, Edward. I don't want to sit down, please. Something in her voice made me do it. I sat in the armchair opposite hers. She sat back down, pulled her knees to her chest the way she always had when she was preparing herself for something difficult. The fire crackled between us. Outside, the wind moved through the old trees. Your mother came to me, she said. 3 days before the accident, she told me she knew about what had happened in Edinburgh. I went very still. What? The affair, Edward. She'd had you followed. She knew everything. She came to me and she told me that if I didn't disappear quietly, she would use what she knew to take James from me. She said she had lawyers ready, that I'd lose him entirely. Me finish, please. I've been waiting 11 years to say this. She took a breath. She offered me money, a house, a new identity somewhere far away. She said it was the best thing for James to grow up away from the scandal, away from the publicity, away from a father who had proven himself untrustworthy. Room felt like it was tilting. My mother told you to disappear, arranged everything. The accident was staged, 2 other coffins. She had connections, Edward, connections I didn't know she had. She told me if I ever came back, she'd make sure James was taken from me through the courts. She had enough on both of us. You believed her. I was 28 years old. I just found out my husband was having an affair.
Lady One came to me 3 days before the accident.
My mother?
Yes.
What did she want?
She knew about the affair. Then she threatened me.
Threatened you with what?
Boy One.
I was terrified. And she was the most powerful woman I'd ever met. Her voice finally cracked. I believed her. I sat back. The fire popped and settled. My mother had died 4 years ago. Heart failure at 81. I'd been at her bedside. She'd held my hand and told me she loved me, and she'd said nothing at all about the living woman and living child she'd hidden from me for 7 years. She took 11 years from us. I said, yes. James doesn't know who I am. No. I've told him his father died in an accident. That's all he's ever known. You've been living here in this house. Only recently, only in the last few weeks. She looked around the room. I couldn't afford our rental anymore. I've been using the last of the money she gave me. I knew this house was empty. I still had the key you gave me when we were first married. I was going to stay for just a few weeks, just until I sorted something out. I never thought you'd come. Never come. In 11 years, I've never come back. I know, I thought it was safe. We sat in silence. The fire burned lower. Somewhere above us, a floorboard creaked. James, probably sitting at the top of the stairs, listening. What did you tell him about me? I asked finally. That his father was a good man who died too young, that he looked like him, that he would have loved him. She was crying now quietly. All of that
Boy
was...
One doesn't know who I am.
No,
What have you told him?
that his father was a good man who died young. I told him that you would have loved him.
I do love him.
True, Eleanor. My voice broke on her name. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I know that doesn't mean anything now. I know what I did, the affair. I know I'm the reason she had leverage over you. I know this is my fault as much as hers. It's not. It is. If I'd been the husband I should have been, she'd have had nothing to threaten you with. I know that, and I'm sorry. I have been sorry every day for 11 years. She was crying openly now. I forgave you for that a long time ago, Edward. Long before any of this. We had problems. We both knew it. The affair was terrible, but it wasn't why I agreed to disappear. Then why? Because I was scared, because she was terrifying, because I thought I was protecting James. She shook her head. I've regretted it every single day. He know anything about his real name, about Ashworth? No, we've been using my maiden name. He's James Hartley. He goes to the local school. He has friends. He has a life. She looked at me. He's a wonderful boy, Edward. He's kind and funny and clever. He reads everything he can get his hands on. He's better at mathematics than I ever was. A ghost of a smile. He has your stubbornness. Despite everything, despite the storm raging through my chest, I almost smiled. Does he? Completely impossible when he's made up his mind about something. That must be maddening. Every single day, we looked at each other. The same 2 people who had stood at an altar 20 years ago and promised each other everything. Older now. Broken in different ways. Carrying different wounds. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. You going to tell him? That's not only my decision. Edward, he's your son. You have every right. He's a 12-year-old boy who thinks his father is dead. I'm not going to blow up his entire life without thinking carefully about how to do it properly, without asking you what you think, without putting him first. I looked at her steadily. regardless of everything else. He comes first. She broke completely then. Put her face in her hands and cried in a way I hadn't heard since the early days of our marriage, when the world had been simpler and our problems had been ordinary ones. I crossed the room, sat on the ottoman in front of her chair, didn't touch her, just sat there the way I used to when she was upset, close enough that she knew she wasn't alone. After a while she looked up. "I'm so sorry, Edward, for all of it. So am I. What do we do tonight?" "Nothing. Tonight I'm going to go make tea because I remember where the kitchen is even after 11 years, and you're going to call James down and we're going to figure out how to sit in the same room together without frightening him. After tonight we're going to figure out the rest, slowly, one step at a time. The lawyers will have questions, the estate, his inheritance, everything. I know, we'll deal with all of it, but not tonight." She looked at me. "You're very calm." "Not calm. I'm absolutely devastated. But you and James have been managing on your own for 11 years, and the least I can do is hold myself together for one evening." Something shifted in her expression. Recognition. The same recognition she'd always had, even in the worst times, that underneath everything I was trying. "Call him down," she said. "Yes, and a leaner. Yes, don't tell him everything tonight. Let him get used to me first. Let us all get used to this. There'll be time for the whole truth. Let's just start with tonight." She nodded, went to the bottom of the stairs, called his name. His footsteps came quickly. He'd been waiting. He appeared in the doorway, 12 years old, my eyes, her chin, a combination of both of us that made my chest ache with something I didn't have words for. "James," Eleanor said carefully. "This is Edward Ashworth. He owns this house. He's going to stay for a while." Boy looked at me with those familiar eyes, assessing me with a directness that was entirely mine. "Are you going to make us leave?" "No. This is your house, though. It's a big house. There's room." He thought about this with great seriousness. "My mum's a good cook. She made soup tonight. There's leftovers if you're hungry." Eleanor made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. "I'd like that very much," I said. "Thank you," he nodded, satisfied, and headed toward the kitchen. As if a stranger appearing in his home on a dark November evening was entirely manageable so long as there was soup involved. Eleanor paused beside me before following him. "Thank you," she whispered. "He's my son," I said simply. "There's nothing to thank me for." We had soup in the kitchen of Ashworth Hall, the three of us at the old oak table where I'd eaten breakfast as a boy. James talked about school, about a science project he was working on, about a book he'd just finished. He ate with the focused enthusiasm of a boy who hadn't eaten since lunch and wasn't particularly concerned with the strange atmosphere hanging over the adults at the table. I mostly listened, watched him, memorized him the way you memorize something you're terrified of losing again. Once he looked up from his bowl and said, "You look familiar." "Do I?" "Yeah. Can't figure out why, though." He went back to his soup without further concern. Eleanor caught my eye across the table. Neither of us said a word. After dinner, James went up to bed. Eleanor and I sat by the fire once more, but differently now. The crisis of the first hour had passed into something quieter and stranger, two people in the wreckage of something enormous, trying to figure out how to stand up again. "Sleep in the east wing," I said. "Give you both space." "You don't have to, I know, but we need to do this slowly for his sake, and for mine if I'm honest," she nodded. "What happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow I spend time with him, not the whole truth yet, just time. Let him get comfortable. Let me get comfortable." I looked at the fire. "And then when he's ready, we tell him everything. What if he hates us for the lies? Then he hates us. And we earn back his trust one day at a time. That's all we can do." She was quiet for a moment. "And us? What about us, Edward?" I looked at her, my wife, the woman I'd lost and mourned and never stopped loving through 11 years of grief. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "We're different people. We've both lived through things the other one doesn't fully understand. We can't simply pick up where we left off. I don't want to walk away. Even if what we build looks different from what we had before." "What does that mean?" "It means we take it as slowly as we need to. We put James first. We learn each other again." I looked at her steadily. "Because I think there's still something worth learning, Eleanor. I think there has been all along," she said quietly. "So do I." The fire burned low. The old house settled around us, its ancient timbers contracting in the cold. And for the first time in 11 years, Ashworth Hall felt like something other than a beautiful, empty tomb. It felt like the beginning of something. James took the truth better than either of us expected. Not immediately. Not without tears and anger and a difficult week where he refused to speak to either of us. He was 12 years old, and his entire understanding of his own history had been dismantled in a single evening. He was entitled to his anger, and we let him have it without defense or excuse. He came to me 3 weeks later, found me in the library going through old estate records. "So you're really my father," he said. "Yes. You genuinely didn't know we were alive. Genuinely didn't know. That must have been awful. Was the worst thing I've ever lived through." He considered this with the same focused seriousness he brought to everything. "I'm glad you came back, even though it was by accident." "Me too. Every day." "You going to live here now, properly, if that's all right with you?" He thought about it. "You'll need to learn where everything is. Mum has a system in the kitchen that makes no sense to anyone but her. Bear that in mind. I'm keeping my room, the blue one at the top of the stairs. That was always the best room in the house." He nodded as though this confirmed something important. Then, as he turned to leave, he stopped in the doorway. "Dad," the word landed like something physical, stopped my breath entirely. "Yes, I'm glad you're not dead." He was gone before I could answer, which was just as well. I couldn't have spoken if I'd tried. Eleanor and I rebuilt things. Slowly, carefully, honestly. Some of what we'd had before was broken beyond repair, and we were honest enough with each other to acknowledge it. But other things we'd both forgotten were still there, turned out to be stronger than either of us expected. The following spring, in the garden at Ashworth Hall, while James was inside pretending not to watch through the library window, I asked her a simple question. "Would you like to try again? Properly. Not just as his parents, but as us." She looked at me for a long time. At the man she'd married 2 decades ago. At the man who had driven down a dark road on impulse and found his whole world waiting inside a house full of lights. "Yes," she said. "I think I would." We married again the following autumn. Small ceremony in the estate chapel. James stood beside me. He was 13 by then, solemn and proud in a suit he'd insisted on choosing himself. As Eleanor walked toward us, James leaned close and said quietly, "Don't mess it up this time." "I won't," I promised. "Good," he said. "I'll be watching." He sat down. Eleanor laughed through her tears. I laughed. The vicar looked gently bewildered. And we began again, the 3 of us, in the house where everything had been lost and somehow impossibly found. If this story moved you, if Edward and Eleanor and young James found their way into your heart the way they found their way back to each other, then this channel is exactly where you belong. Here at Taley's Beyond the Porch, we tell stories like this one every single week. Stories about love that survives the impossible, about families broken apart and put back together, about ordinary people making extraordinary choices when everything is on the line. The Duke and the Duchess are just the beginning. There are more stories waiting, more characters who need someone to root for them, more moments that will make you hold your breath and feel everything all at once. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if this one moved you, share it with someone who needs to believe that the people we love can find their way back to us. Because sometimes they do. Sometimes on a dark November evening, you turn down a long gravel drive on nothing but instinct and an old ache in your chest. And the lights are on. And everyone you lost is waiting inside. Welcome to the Duke and Duchess. We are so glad you are here.